Right, okay, so here's the thing. A couple of months ago, I stood here on this very channel and I spoke to you guys in a video entitled How the Fiend Saved Bray Wyatt. I was talking about what I thought at the time was the most compelling character maybe in all of wrestling. It was great stuff. Things were going tremendously well for Bray Wyatt. And in that video, I spoke all about the tremendous build, about the thought, the effort, the passion that had gone into creating this character, about how successful it had been in reviving what looked like a dead career, about how much fun we were all having with the Firefly Funhouse. And of course, I talked all about that SummerSlam debut. That thing was awesome. The Fiend looked like the most intimidating force in the world as he just straight up murdered Finn Balor. Up to that point, everything was great. That video was full of earnest, honest praise. It was done out of hope. It was done out of an appreciation for the tremendous job that both Bray and WWE had done with this riveting character. And all of it was earned. They really hadn't taken a single step wrong. And at the time, like I've just said, I thought it was one of the best things going on in the entire sport. I think that video was very complimentary to everyone involved. There was barely a single criticism within, but towards the end, you always have to mention the old caveat. In WWE, the follow-up is everything. You can have an awesome moment, you can have an awesome few months, but you know, if what comes after that isn't just as good, things can go off the rails. However, I did temper that by saying that up to that stage, there wasn't a single problem with The Fiend. Everything had been perfect. So really, WWE had earned that trust. There was no reason to be cynical about the character's future. And, well, I guess the best thing I can say about that video and its title is that it hasn't aged very well, because here we are, it's at the time of recording, October, and WWE have done a massive WWE and WWE the hell out of The Fiend. The headline WWE bury The Fiend in only his second match sounds like one of those threads that just gets downvoted to hell on Reddit Squared Circle, but it's kind of what happened, isn't it? At Hell in a Cell 2019, WWE presented this character as an invincible monster who was downed and incapacitated by a series of regular wrestling moves. The Fiend took several weapon shots, but so do at least 2 or 3 other wrestlers on every single pay-per-view. And yeah, he no-sold some of Seth's most impactful offense at about 700 different stomps, but he was incapacitated. He was on the ground in a dreadfully long period, drawn out by a toxic din. Astonishingly, after everything we'd been through to get to that point, you could feel the slivers of hope draining from the character as every minute passed by. And for reference, if you look at the recent Raw match between Seth Rollins and Humberto Carrillo, the former 205 Live man had more offense against Seth than The Fiend, this unstoppable force. What WWE were trying to do here was lay the match out something like a horror movie. They wanted the unstoppable monster, the unkillable monster, to keep coming back and back and back every single time he was knocked down. But the problem here in this setting, with this layout, under this context, it just doesn't work. It completely undermines the basic psychology of professional wrestling to create an incompatible farce. If you look at the things that actually incapacitated The Fiend, we're not talking about, I don't know, a Mick Foley-esque fall from the cell or something equally violent. We're talking about a curb stomp, the same curb stomp that Braun Strowman bantered off at Clash of Champions. And yeah, there were some chair shots in there as well, but if you're an Attitude Era fan, as a lot of you viewing most certainly are, you can't even take that seriously as a match ender, let alone a monster killer. Honestly, just imagine Michael Myers selling a suplex from one of his victims. It's just as ridiculous. That is what WWE did to The Fiend, although really, they started undermining him before the bell had even rung. When The Fiend first started emerging in the Firefly Funhouse, it was quite clear that this character was supposed to be a manifestation of Bray Wyatt's most twisted inner thoughts. The Fiend and Bray were separate entities occupying the same body. This was part of what made the gimmick so sick in the first place, so when that entrance graphic came up on your screen reading The Fiend Bray Wyatt, it was kind of a warning sign. It was as if Vince McMahon had just decided somewhere in the past couple of months to conflate the two entities and just cram them together, presenting them in the same way that you would the big dog, Roman Reigns, or the boss, Sasha Banks. It was a load of cliched nonsense. In fact, if you go back and watch the pay-per-view and you listen close enough, like I can with my massive satellite dish ears, you can almost hear Vince McMahon screaming into Vic Joseph's headset, "Make sure you call him the Fiend, Bray Wyatt, pal, because our fans are too stupid not to know it's Bray Wyatt." And that's a terrible impression, but this match was terrible, so that's what it deserved. The joy of this character was that it allowed for several different interpretations, and one of these, the most popular and probably the most compelling one, was that the Fiend was a product of Wyatt's disassociated personality. He was a product of Bray's fury and self-loathing at having never really fulfilled his massive potential, not just another goober with a nickname, and until Vince vinced it, it was awesome. The horror had a genuine Lynchian quality to it, and there was a really unsettling contrast between the lightness and the darkness that inevitably conquers everything. The Muscle Man dance was as fun as SummerSlam was intimidating, and for a while, it looked like WWE had crafted the kind of over-the-top pantomime character that only they can. It was an awesome sports entertainment creation, and probably the perfect counter to the rising tide of pro wrestling. Until Vince vinced it. As reported by Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful.com, what happened at Hell in a Cell was no accident. This is exactly what Vince McMahon wrote. He wanted this to happen. Maybe not the backlash, but you get my point. Anyway, speaking of the backlash, it was so bad that WWE completely refused to even acknowledge that the match happened on the Raw after Hell in a Cell. And then, on the SmackDown after Hell in a Cell, we got another dopey development in The Fiend's downfall. The Fiend interfered as Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins were wrestling in the open match. He burst through the canvas, he dragged Rollins down to symbolic hell. A symbolic hell that Rollins escaped in just 12 seconds. So what exactly happened here? What are we supposed to believe? How did Seth escape? Was there a struggle? Was there even some taunting? Did they just go for a little tickle and a cup of tea and a little slice of cake? Was it all... I don't know, man. I can't make any sense of this absolute guff anymore. But you know what? I wouldn't be at all surprised if you sat down and told me that Vince was there in the writer's room and told everyone, just have him do some Kane stuff. Just make him another generic, supernatural dope. And make no mistake, that's what this angle was. It was Kane stuff. It was the same goofy, antiquated nonsense that Kane has been doing his entire career. And now, The Fiend was doing it on SmackDown just a few weeks ago, because this is Vince's show. And in 2019, Vince is creatively bankrupt. The whole thing was just hokey and dumb, and The Fiend came across as a generic boogeyman. It was the exact opposite of what we were promised in those fiendishly creative Firefly Funhouse teases. So at this stage, and some of you will argue this point, but I think it's pretty safe to say that The Fiend has failed. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that it is over for The Fiend and the character can't be saved, but if you look throughout the past 20 years or so of Vince's booking, I mean, the evidence is there. He's probably cooked. And what The Fiend's plight does is bring into focus WWE's complete inability or refusal to commit to anything. And really, it's absolutely maddening. If a supernaturally powered horror movie monster can't win his second match, then what's the point of investing anything in anyone else? This is on WWE here. This form of storytelling makes it impossible to have any kind of faith in any character progressing up the ranks, whether it's The Fiend, whether it's Cedric Alexander, whether it's Humberto Carrillo, because in the end, you know exactly what's going to happen. So now, after being genuinely unsettled by The Fiend at SummerSlam, WWE fans are genuinely fearful for The Fiend going forward, because really, if you can't invest in The Fiend, what can you invest in? The character is a symbol of the malaise and the nihilistic pointlessness that runs through everything in WWE. He is the fixed grin face of WWE. Unrelated to The Fiend, shortly after Hell in a Cell, we saw the firing of Eric Bischoff from his position as executive director of SmackDown. This was yet another example that Vince is gonna Vince, because as we heard from the musings of Jim Ross, Wrestling Observer sources, Fox insiders, and countless others, Bischoff was only ever hired to be fired. Eric was a scapegoat. He was a fall guy that Vince could use to shield himself from any blame. And yeah, while Paul Heyman's fingerprints have been on Raw every now and then, what's happened recently has shifted the narrative once more, as it so often does. Vince never really went away, did he? The disturbing truth behind The Fiend is that it has proven that WWE is creatively bankrupt. It has been for years, and now more and more people, more than ever before, are waking up to it. The Fiend was an overpowered character, but Vince wouldn't allow him to show that power. And on the few occasions that he did, it manifested in ways that completely destroyed the sense of disbelief. It was schlocky nonsense. And in hindsight, if this thing was going to work, then he probably should have got a full-on Brock Lesnar push immediately. He should have been a destructive force. He should have ruined everything before him, and the only person that should have been able to counter him would be a well-built babyface, built up over several months, ideally maybe even a year, with the payoff coming at WrestleMania in one triumphant moment. Instead, and this just makes me laugh at this stage, WWE 50-50'd The Fiend in his second match. At this point, WWE would probably have, I don't know, Cthulhu look shocked when Shorty G stole one from him. The commentators would yell. They call him the Great Old One. You know, I was talking to Cthulhu earlier today and he told me that he wants to open a monstrously craven portal here in the WWE universe. Cthulhu, a skyscraper-sized horrific force of immense cosmic terror, is having trouble building momentum over Drew Gulak. The Fiend, like Cthulhu, shouldn't sell, because selling undermines the monstrous aura, and you know, admittedly, that's a very difficult thing to structure around. It's a difficult thing to get over, and perhaps after all of this, in hindsight, trying to do so in the least creative wrestling promotion in the world was a bad idea. It's sad because this was once a wonderful character, dreamt up from the immense creative mind of Bray Wyatt, who was given the time and the agency to perfect it. The vignettes that got it over were produced out with WWE's umbrella, and they took a hell of a lot of time, months, maybe even as much as a year. But it took just a few moments, a few minutes, for The Fiend to fall apart in that fetid WWE ring. This is a systematic failure, rotting the WWE creative process from within. And in the end, it seems that abandon hope, all ye who exist here, was just a meta joke too far. Anyway guys, my take done, your take now. So head down to the comment section below and fire that off in any which way you please. But I don't know, maybe don't be offensive. That would probably be a good idea. Once you've done that, you can like, share, and subscribe, and you can ring the bell for notifications. You can also follow us on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE, and you can find me at Andy H. Murray, even if you just want to tell me how wrong I am. A lot of people like to do that, so join in. Bye bye.